Hello everybody and welcome to the Tabletop Inn. Please join me at the tavern table while I give you a brief overview of Embarcadero. Embarcadero was designed by Aaron Buckingham and Ed Marriott and published by Renegade Games. Why don't I go ahead and give you a brief overview of what you're looking at when you play. So I've got the game set up for basically a one-player game right now, but for a two-player game there'd just be an additional ship tile out here with the building on it. We'll get to that in a moment, but essentially the game starts off with all the players deciding on what entrepreneur they want to play as. I'm going to use Luenza Wilson, for this example. The one side of these character cards has just a basic description of that character along with their one resource that they have throughout the game. On the back, it has their one resource they have throughout the game, along with some different abilities. This is used in the advanced variant of the game. They have an ongoing ability, a one-time ability, and an end-of-game ability. In this case, Lorenzo's ability is when you dock a ship, you may place +1 structure on that ship tile. We'll get to how you place structures in a moment. Their one-time ability is when you construct a purple building, place +1 or +2 structures on it. Again, we'll get to that in a moment. And then their end of game is for every purple building you have, you gain 1 victory point. Personally, the advanced variant of the game doesn't really add a whole lot besides those abilities. If you're playing it for the first time and you feel like your group can handle it, just go ahead and play with the advanced variant because it does add quite a bit to the game. So after everyone's picked their cards and set up their little player board here, basically for setup all you do is just place your player card off to this side of it. You're basically ready to start getting everything else set up. I've already got everything set up here. This line here is full of ship cards. You'll shuffle this deck and just place 4 out. And this here are structure cards. You'll shuffle this deck and then place 4 out. We've got ship tiles off to the side. Don't need to worry about those for now. After all this is set up, players will take a 3-tiled ship, which are these right here, and they'll place them in the harbor with one of the short sides facing the shore here, and then they'll claim it by placing one of their little structure tokens onto that ship. So in a 2-player game, there'd be 2 ships. In a 3-player game, there'd be 3. In a 4-player game, you have to flip this board over and use the other side of this board, which has, I believe, either 4 or 5 wharfs on it, and then there'd just be either 4 or 5. To play with 5 players, though, you do need an expansion for this game that I do not have, but just note you cannot play with 5 players on this board. I believe the expansion comes with a new board that you use. After that, players take their victory point trackers. Each one of these are actually unique. In this case, the red players is a saw. I believe there's like hammers and wrenches, things like that for the other players. Place it on the 0 track at the very bottom here. They'll place their second tracker, which is also just a saw, they're all the same, at the top of the city council track here. Now, when you get to certain points in the city council, you'll get various things. The first one you get to is you get to pick a special resource, which is either a steel, paper, or brick. All of these are one-time use resources. Once you get to something that requires them, you can pay that, but you do not get these resources throughout the game. We'll get to why that's important in a moment. Another thing you can get is a landmark card revealed. Landmark cards are these red cards here. So whenever you pass a certain point on that council track, you get to reveal this card, and it is a community pile. Anyone can pick up these cards if they can pay the resources for them. And as you can see, they are worth quite a few points at the end of the game. So those are the landmark tiles. There's various other actions that, or bonuses, that you get from progressing on this council track. I won't go into every single one of them. This is just going to be a really brief overview to give you an idea of the game. The game is played over 3 rounds. The round bonuses are depicted by these cards here. So in this case, the round 1 bonus is whoever has the most money by the end of the round gets 10 points. Second most is 6 points. Third most is 2 points. So there's different bonuses, or scoring, what's the word I'm looking for? Scoring, totally lose my train of thought. Parameters. There's different ways you can score in the game. My brain just completely shut down. And it's actually varying throughout every game. You're probably not going to play the game the same every time because of how you're drawing these cards. There's a whole deck of these achievement cards that you shuffle out and deal at the start of the game. So that's the one thing that I really like about the game is the variety of it. So essentially on a turn, which is actually, there's 2 phases that are actually depicted on the side of the player board here. So I'm just going to read off it real quick. You can play a card from your hand one of 3 ways. You may also construct a landmark, which is these red cards. The first action you can take in the action phase is docking a ship. You can place a ship adjacent to a wharf, ship, or infill tile, pay a docking fee $1 per adjacent wharf space, place a structure on that ship space. So what that means is, let's say I had the Apollo in my hand and I wanted to dock this ship. So I would play this card and I would use a 4-tile ship and place it down anywhere on the board. So if I were the red player, I could essentially put it right here and face it out, and I wouldn't have to pay a wharf fee because it's not actually adjacent to any wharf. But if I wanted to place it here, which is at the top of the ship here, I'd have to pay $4 because it's $1 for every adjacent tile. I know the tile is really hard to see in this, but I have the camera zoomed as far as it can go so it gets everything that you can see on everything that's going on the table here. So that's docking a ship. When you dock a ship, you gain these resources shown on the left side. And it's actually really neat. So when you dock a ship, you place it on the right side of your player board. And if you go to dock another one, you just overlap the ship just to show the resources on the card, so you're saving some table space. So that is docking a ship. And when you dock a ship, you then place another structure on it to claim it as yours. So that's one way to place structures onto the board. Now, while we're on the subject of placing structures, that is actually one of the ways you advance on this council track. So let's say another player had a ship right here with their structure, or their structure right here. Actually, right here, for this example. If I were to place another structure on the center one, and they were orthogonally adjacent, that lets me advance on the council track. So that's one way to advance on that. There's various other ways, but that's the main way to do it. So that is docking a ship. Constructing a building. Place a building on top of structures you own. Place a structure on top of one space or up to all spaces of the building. Sink a ship if applicable. So what that means is, one of the signature moves is when you build one of these structures, you can fill up the entire space. What that means is, let's say I had a building right here. When I'm making a building, for example, let's say I'm putting these apartments on these 2 buildings that I have. You see, it requires 2 spaces. So now that I've got 2 buildings here, I can place this tile on top of these 2 to signify that I have built these apartments. Now, what it means when it says the signature move is, normally you only place one structure on top of these buildings to continue building upward. But in some signature cases, you can fill out all of those spaces. I believe there's also signature costs where you can pay additional to build out the entire structure. In this case, the boarding house, if you pay 2 additional clay, you get to fill it out. That's the main use for it, but I believe one of the other players lets you do that as well, or one of the other characters, excuse me. So that's building a structure. That's also how you place more structures. You can also place structures by scrapping these cards. You can scrap certain cards. So for example, if we were to scrap this apartments, you get to place 3 structures. We'll get to how you scrap in a moment. It's actually the very next action you can take. Scrapping a card, use either the scrap action of the card or one of the 2 basic scrap actions. So if you're scrapping it for the card, like the apartments, you can place 3 structures. Or you can either gain 3 money, 3 gold, or just place 2 structures. So you can either choose what the scrap action is on your card or one of the basic ones. So those are the 3 actions you can take on the action phase. The next action is the buy phase, which everyone has to do. You have to do the buy phase. So in the buy phase, you look at this track here and you decide what card you want to buy. So in this case, if I wanted to buy the Apollo, I'd have to spend $2. So after you buy, then you choose a card from your hand and store it. So if you can see, there's different layers on this player board here. When you're storing these cards, that becomes your hand, and then your starting hand in the next round. So keep that in mind. Actually, at the end of the game, that also goes into end game scoring. So that was a super high overview on the actions that you can take. There's a lot of depth and strategy to the game. You know, you have to plan out where you're going to want to build. You obviously have to manage your money. So if you're wanting to build next to these wharfs, you have to have a lot of money, because these wharfs also go into scoring. You gain points equal to however many structures are next to this wharf that are yours. So if you have a majority of structures on this wharf, you gain a certain amount of points. If you have the second most, you gain so on and so forth. So it is advantageous to build along those wharfs. You just have to make sure you have the right amount of money for it. Talking about the components, I mean, the components are great. I love this whole stacking. You know, the game has different layers. It's really hard to see with the top-down view, but this is the best way I could set it up so I could get the entire board into view. But I love just the fact that it's on a 3D plane. It's not just putting stuff onto the board. There's also these little sunk tokens because some buildings require you to sink a ship, like this boarding house. You can see the very top icon, if the camera will focus, there it is the sinking ship icon. So if you need to sink a ship, you have to not only pay all the resources that are required by the boarding house, you also have to use one of these sunk tokens and cover up the ship's resources that it's been giving you. So that's how you satisfy that sunk cost, and that means you do not have the resources that ship gave you any longer. All these resources are ongoing. They're not one-time uses. The only time they're one-time use are these special ones. The fact that this is just perfectly lined up to only cover up those resource token or those resource tiles is great. All of the plastic components feel really thick. Here are the infill and wharf tiles that was being talked about. You can either use this side for a wharf tile or this side for an infill. You can stretch out these wharfs to make them worth more points throughout the game. The plastic pieces for the buildings, the structures, are really nicely detailed. You can see it's got some little windows and it's had a little door on it. The camera won't focus. There it goes. Oops, really, really nice. And they fit really nicely on these little tiles that have slots on them that are big enough for those structures. So that's really nice. Here is the base money for the game, which is just the plastic or cardboard cutouts. They're actually not really bad. They're nice, thick cardboard. I didn't have any issues punching these out, but I actually do not remember where I bought these, but if I do remember, or if I can find them, I will put them in the description. I bought these metal tokens for the game that actually look like they fit really well with the theme of the game. At the back, it looks like, I think that's the Capitol building on it, yes. So, and they're all the same 10, 5, and 1s, these metal coins. So, I always recommend, if you can, pick up metal coins when you're playing a game often, because obviously they last a lot longer. Looking at the insert on this game, which is fantastic. So each player has their own storage for bits. I have the ship tiles up here in this corner. Here, I have the cards. So there are card cutouts for the 2 decks that you have, 4 decks, excuse me. And then here, I've just been placing the various tokens, the one-time use resources, the sunk tokens, and the wharf tiles. So again, very high overview of the game. Hopefully this gives you a general idea of how it's played. There's obviously some things that I missed and some deeper strategies that you can get into, but I'm not going to get into it because I'd be sitting here talking to you all day. Why don't I go ahead and sit back down and give you my overview of the game. So as I said, that was a super high overview of Embarcadero. There's so many other things that I could get into, but I'd be sitting here for quite a while explaining all the things that you could do in the game. It's a fantastic game. Me and my friends really liked it, and I actually am really looking forward to playing it again. The art on it is really, really great. The details in the board is fantastic. The box cover is really nice. The components are great. Just they all fit so well onto those tiles when you're stacking the buildings up, and it's really fun to get those built up to a certain point, because I'm sure you saw in the apartments card, there are certain cards where if you're building up to a certain level, you get points based on how far you built up. So it's really good to like plan that strategy through. There's also at the end game when you're storing the cards, they're worth their victory points when they're stored. So that's another really great aspect, is what cards do you potentially want to save to store for later. So there's just so many ways you can win in this game. There's so many ways you can gain points in the game. There's no one singular strategy. I think the second time we played it, we actually got over 100 points, which was great. They give you a little counter to signify you've gotten 100, and you just start around the track again. So that was really great. I didn't think we would get that on our second playthrough, but we really grasped the game very well. I think our major complaint, and it's mine as well, the game feels somewhat short. You play out the 3 rounds, and each round has 5 turns. Yeah, I had to count it on the board real quick. 5 turns. And those go by really quick once you know what you're doing. And then, so the first round can go fairly slow. The second round can kind of pick up. And then you get to the third round, it's the end of the game, and you're like, okay, I've built up this really great engine where I'm, able to build these structures. I'm able to place these ships. And it feels like it stops so soon when you are really getting into it. So that's probably my A major gripe on it is it feels kind of short, and I don't know if it's because we really kind of grasped the game really quickly and we were able to play through it very quickly, or if it really is just that short. Either way, I think when we go to play it again, we're probably going to do some kind of house variant where maybe we're going to, after we play through the 3 rounds, we're going to reshuffle the cards and then play maybe 2 more additional rounds, so for a total of 5 rounds. We'll see, but for now, that is all I have for Embarcadero. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like to let me know. If there's anything I could have done better, please leave a comment and also let me know. And thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed your stay at the tavern table. We'll see you next time. We're actually the tabletop inn. We'll see you next time. Take care. I should just call it the tavern table, shouldn't I? But tabletop inn sounds so much cooler, and this is the tavern table. I just for some reason can never differentiate the two when I'm talking. I think I'm insane.